Hello, everyone. Welcome to Self Knowledge. Today we are having lecture number 24 of these 50 lectures that are part of the Self Knowledge course that we are broadcasting every Sunday through this page. Today we are having a very interesting topic. Today we are going to be talking about the life and the level of the being. And the objective of talking about this interesting lecture is to learn how to transform our lives by transforming the levels of being. And to start talking about this topic, I want to start like talking a little bit about life. You can see that many people just live their lives. They are born, they go to school, they grow, they make a career, get a job, get married, um, get old, and they just die without ever making a stop in their lives to make these existential questions that are actually we all need to make and without ever like finding an answer for the purpose of their existence to make these questions like who are we, where do we come from, where are we going, what are we living for, why are we living. And the worst thing is that we think we know the answer. We don't know, and we don't know that we don't know. And that is like the worst thing. That we actually ignore the purpose of our existence. We ignore actually the secrets of all our tragedies, and we never like make a stop to reflect and to find within ourselves the answer to the, let's say, the mysteries of life. We never get to understand why things happen to us once and again, why we always like live the same situations, why we repeat the same mistakes, what we are actually always like attracting the same kind of people to our lives. And we can never get to know what can we really do to stop suffering. Sometimes we feel that we are very strong just because we have money or because we have a college degree. But actually, when the time comes, when the tragedy comes, when the natural catastrophe comes, the bankruptcy of the business, or when the disease comes, then we realize that we are frighteningly weak. You can see that a stomach ache makes us sad. A toothache shows us how weak we are because it doesn't matter how strong or how important we think we are, or if we think that we know the truth about everything. When we get to get what we think or what we thought it was the important thing in life, then we see that when the time passes, we still feel like that insatisfaction. Maybe at some point, someone can believe that by finding a partner, is going to be happy because thinks he's unhappy because he's alone. But happens that finds a partner and a couple of year passes of or maybe just a couple of months, and they experience that they are unsatisfied, that they are actually unhappy, feeling miserable because, for example, now is suffering because the partner doesn't call him, or because the partner was unfaithful to him. Or we can see that maybe someone at some point of their life could think that is going to be happy when find or get to find a better job, because the problem, the cause of the constant insatisfaction is because of this job. And happens that finds the job, and when the time passes, feels start feeling again that insatisfaction because now realizes that at work they are demanding a lot from him or from her, and is still feeling like, you know, we get many things in life, but we continue to be unhappy and we continue to feel miserable and we don't understand why. And sometimes we get to think that when time passes, things are going to become better. But our parents and our grandparents used to think like that. They used to think that when time passes, things are going to be better. And what we are living in this point in the world, in our lives, make us realize that time is not going to make things better. Maybe we can think that we are evolving, but it is not like that. Not because we now have all these technological advances and all that greater access to information means that we are actually evolving, because it is only reading the universal history and watching what is happening in the world today for us to know that we are the same barbarians of yesterday, and that instead of improving, we have become worse. Now, the perversity, the drugs, all the things that you are seeing in the society actually show us that we are, as human beings, are not evolving. And all these, as I said, technological advances and all these great access to information are actually just serve to make us more lazy, more lustful, more greedy, more envious. Because even though there is a lot of information, no one bothers to investigate anymore. And what happened is that the external changes that we can experience in the world never are going to lead us to an inner advance, to a spiritual advance. All people, all humanity wants to change the world. Everybody wants to change the world. But the problem is that nobody wants to change themselves. And actually, we need to understand that if we want the world to change, we need to change, as the mass is the sum of the individuals. So, if we want transformation in the world, we need to change within ourselves. Because if this society is as it is, if it suffers from all the ills that it suffers from, it is because within each one of us, we carry the same elements that we see in the society. But we prefer to complain about the government corruption, for example, but we justify a lot our internal corruption. We easily criticize and that guy because he's so perverse, but we never stop to observe our own inner perversion. And that is the thing, that if we never stop and realize that if we are part of this society, it is because we are related to it. It is because we vibrate with it. And if we want to see a change in our lives, in our situations, in our circumstances, if we want to attract better people to our life, we need to make an inner change. And we need making that by making this change, we need to, or if we raise our level of beings, then we are going to experience that change. And what is a level of being? Well, when we are talking about a level of being, we are talking actually about a moral level. No one can deny that there are different social levels. There are people from church, and there are people from brothers. Sorry, there are people from let's say shops and people from countrysides and so on. Those there are also um, different levels of being. A level of being is what we are internally, and it has nothing to do with age, with social level, with level of education, with our level of fame or our level of beauty. Nothing to do, because what we are internally doesn't have nothing to do with what we are externally. You can see that a rich person can be, for example, as drunk or drunkard, as a poor person. And you can see that a person with university studies can be as jealous as someone without any university studies. Or you can see that a person with a lot of fame or with a lot of beauty can be as depressed as someone that has no fame, no beauty. So actually, what we are, mm, our true being is what we are internally. The virtues or the defects that we carry in our own psychology. And why is it important to know what is our level of being? It is important because our level of being is what attracts the different people and the different circumstances of our lives, be it pleasant or unpleasant. And as long as we don't understand that by law of correspondence, we are always attracting the same things to our life, then what happened to us yesterday is going to happen to us today and will happen to us tomorrow. We will always repeat the same mistakes and we are never going to learn the lessons of life. All things you can see are repeated in our lives. We say the same things, we do the same things, we regret the same things. And as long as the level of being, of our level of being, um, doesn't change radically, the repetition of all our miseries, of all the sins, of all our misfortunes will continue. All things, all circumstances that happen outside of us on the stage of this world are exclusively, the reflection of what we carry inside of us. That is why it's so important to change our level of being, because as is our interior is our exterior, and when one changes internally and such change is radical, then the exterior, the circumstances of life will change too. An example is that, for example, an example is that if we are if we are violent people, then we are always going to attract violent situations. Thief, for example, what can attract to his life? Well, Yale circumstances. And lustful person, what can attract to his life? Or a jealous person, what is going to attract to his life? Um, you can see, actually, when we like sit and reflect on this, we get to realize that yes, we get to realize that what we are inside is what it is, the cause of all the things that we are experiencing, in our lives. So if we really want a radical change, what we must first understand is that each one of us, whether we are white or black or yellow or brown or ignorant or enlightened, each one of us is at one level of being. And it is impossible to raise to another level of being if we ignore our current level of being. If we don't know what are the defects within us that keep us like tied to our current level of being, that are attracting to different situations of our lives, maybe situations of sadness, of conflicts, of disappointments, problems, of suffering. If we don't get to discover them, then we will not be able to eliminate them, and therefore we will not be able to raise our level of being. To understand more about the level of beings, we must imagine like a ladder that extends down and up. In some step of this marvelous ladder of being, we are, and in the steps down, we are going to find people that are worse than us. And up the steps, you will find people that are better than us. And in this vertical life, this marvelous stairway of being, it is clear that we are going to find all the level of beings because each person, is different. And in this horizontal line of life is where we are going to find all our lives with all the different circumstances that surround our lives. In this horizontal line of life that belongs to time, we are going to be born, we are going to grow old, we are going to die, and when we die, we are going to be born again, and we are going to develop a different personality. Each time we are born again, we develop a new personality, and the personality belongs to this line, to the line of time. There is no future for personality. Every time we die, our personality die, and when we are born again, then we grow or we develop a new personality with a new name, with a new family, with a new social status, with a new race, whatever. So the horizontal line of life actually has nothing to do with the vertical line of life. Well, or the vertical line of the level of me. Because this horizontal line of life belongs only to time, but this vertical line doesn't have anything to do with time. Actually, the level of being can be raised from moment to moment. The present moment, here and now, is where you can make a real change in our life. So, how to raise to a superior level of being? Well, the first thing is to get to identify what is our current level of being. And to know that, we must reflect what are we attracting to our lives. So, we need to sit and we need to start reflecting what kind of people and what circumstances we are attracting to our lives. So, most of us actually ignore what is their current level of being. But if we want to ascend to a higher level, we must do this first work. We need to get to know what is our current level of being. That is easy. It's just to sit and reflect. What am I attracting? So if I take a look at people around me, the people that I'm constantly attracting to our lives, and the situations that I'm attracting. For example, some people say that they are not lucky in love because they have this partner and things go wrong, and they find a different partner and things go wrong, and then can sit and reflect what defines those partners that I'm constantly attracting. In that way, I'm going to find what is my level of being. And when I, for example, say, okay, I'm attracting a violent person, or I am attracting so lazy people, or I'm attracting so yellow people, then I need to start observing myself and finding that defect within myself. I must ask myself, when have I done the same? Why am I attracting that into my life? What is inside of me that is attracting this kind of people into my life, this kind of situations? And once I find that within myself, because I cannot change my partner, the only person that I can change is myself. And if I want to change the circumstances in my life, I need to find in within myself what is that is attracting those people, those circumstances. The second step is actually wanting to change the life that you have. Because the first thing is to recognize that you have those defects, and the next thing is to stop feeling the victim and start taking responsibility for your life and for your circumstances. So it is important to wanting to change the life you have, because sometimes we are attached to our current level of being. And the next thing is learning how to change our level of being. So once we have realized what is our level of being, once we want to change our lives, then we need to know that the level of being can only be raised at this critical point. And what is the critical point? Is the present moment, the here and now, not in the past, not in the future, here and now. All our problems can be solved if we learn how to modify our level of being. So you see the horizontal line of life and the vertical line, and then there, in that critical point that is here and now, is where we are going to make this change. In the horizontal life, we are going to find the life with all its daily situations, with all the people that we have attracted to our lives. And there we are going to find our pain, our suffering, our debts, etc. And now what we are going to do is that we're going to climb the vertical line. For this, we need to start living the present moment. And by doing this, it's like if we're going to have a foot on the horizontal line and another foot in the vertical line. So what we are going to do, we are going to be in self-observation. We are going to be living the present moment. We are going to make an effort to stay in the here and now. So to don't let our minds, our emotions take us to another time or another place in time by remembering, by planning. Just be in concentration, in self-observation. And from there, you can solve any situation. Like if, for example, as I said, you have constant fights with your partner, and you have realized, reflecting on this, that this is a circumstance that has become like quite recurrent in your life, and that this situation is actually preventing you from feeling full and from feeling happy. So you realize that you are stuck on that level of being, and you already want to change that life. So what you do, you begin to make the effort to maintain yourself in a state of self-observation, monitoring your mind, your emotion, the words you say, the actions you make from moment to moment, to discover the psychological defects within you that act in every situations. So you can get to discover what inside of you is attracting the situations of your life to happen. So you keep living in the here and now in a state of full self-observation. And when a situation happens that causes that the discussion with your partner start, that the fight start, as you're making the effort to stay in the present moment, observing yourself, then you would be able to see when, for example, your partner calls you out for something. If you're self-observing, you are going to see how pride arises in your mind, or how feelings of impatience, of anger arises in your emotions. And at that moment, thanks of thanks that you are in this state of self-observation, in that present moment, you can discover that your level of being is that of a proud person and is that of an angry person. If you never realize it, if you don't change it, then you could spend your entire life having altercations over and over again with that and with subsequent partners without even realizing that you are attracting those situations. But now that you have discovered what your level of being is, you can change it. And how you're going to change it? Well, refusing first to let those negative thoughts that arises uh, take you from to react without letting those emotions of anger take you to react in a wrong way, but instead you make a conscious elimination of all those negative ways of being by asking the force of love of your consciousness to eliminate that from you with a simple phrase, a mental phrase. You can ask Divine Mother, eliminate this defect from me. And everything that you discover within yourself, in your mind, in your emotions, your impatience, your rage, you are going to ask your Divine Mother to eliminate each of these. Also, you are going to eliminate every desire. For example, the desire to yell, to respond, sarcastically, etc. And what is going to happen if you do this? That each of our negative ways of being has trapped a portion of our consciousness. And by refusing to let them manifest and by eliminating them, those sparks of consciousness will be released and we will be able to act without the conditioning of the ego. We will be able to act in a conscious way. And by doing that, we will have raised a small step on or in our level of being, and we will see that for there to be a fight, you need or two are needed. But if one of these two people is consciously transcending that situation, then everything changes. And as you continue doing this exercise, practicing the self observation, practicing the ongoing death, that is the name for this practice in which we are discovering the wrong ways of being that wants to manifest in us in the situations and eliminating them, then you are going to be experiencing great changes within yourself and outside of yourself. Since when there is an internal change, it begins to be reflected on the outside. And as long as we keep living in this, let's say, mathematical point, which is the present moment, we will be able to have the opportunity to raise our level of being. When the situation, for example, an altercation with a co-worker or with the children arises, then by being in self-observation, we will be able to realize those ways of being inside us that are what are attracting those circumstances to come to our lives, and we will be able to eliminate them consciously, and in that way we are going to be consciously climbing another level of being. And so we are discovering in each situation that is presented to us, we are going to be raising our level of being. We are going to be able to transform our life. And so life is going to be better. And we will stop attracting people who were related to our previous level of being, and we will stop attracting those circumstances that were related to our previous level of being. Now, it is important to understand that not all people want to change their lives. There are people who wants to continue in that circle of pleasure and pain that is life. However, there are people who are already, let's say, spiritually mature. These people yearn for change. And actually, when they hear about these topics, their souls like recognize them, and they like get to understand them. And when a person is spiritually mature, is because is when his inner being gives them the opportunity to receive this knowledge, and that maturity occurs because our seminal envelope, which is that auric field that we all have, which is where our ego is already very black. And as we can see here in this graph, when our seminal envelope is like black enough, it is when the amount of wisdom that our being needs can be like recovered. And therefore, at that moment, the person begins to feel like a spiritual longing, a real desire to change their lives. And at that moment, when we receive the knowledge, from that moment and on, we are no longer going to continue lowering to levels of being. From that moment, we will begin to climb little by little, step by step, and at each level, we are going to find people that is going to be related to that level of being. And while we are in the lowest levels, we will see that we are going to attract heavy people and heavy circumstances in our lives. But as we go up and up, our level of being are also this envelope is going to be like more clear, and we are going to be rescuing a lot of consciousness that before were trapped in each one of the details of our ego that were the ones who blankens this like envelope. And when doing that, we will begin to attract people with whom we have like a spiritual affinity, who are going to generate positive changes in our lives. So when we or the people that we are going to attract to our lives will also be generating positive changes in their lives inside of them, and are going to be developing their unconsciousness just as we are. Now, it is important to know, now that we know how to raise our level of being, how not to lose, yeah, the steps that we have planned. How not to lower the level of beings. And we need to know that once we get to a higher level of being, we understand those who are below. For example, if my level of being previously was of a drug addict and I managed to raise my level of being, then I will understand all the people who are still slaves of drugs. But what if instead I don't understand them, but rather I criticize those at the bottom of the ladder? Well, by law of, let's see, correspondence, I will return to their level, and I will begin to attract those people and circumstances into my life. Because criticism, a lack of understanding and love is what lowers our level of beings. And if instead we make the mistake of criticizing someone who is in a higher level of being than our own, then as consequence we will end up going down to the levels of being from where that person drew the wisdom and awareness to ascend to their current level of being. So it is important to understand that criticism only shows a lack of understanding, a lack of consciousness. Therefore, if we want to continue to ascend more and more our levels of being, we must learn not to criticize. That is very important. And the last step is to practice the three factors of revolutions of consciousness. Because as we saw, the basis for raising the level of being is the psychological death. It is being eliminating each of our negative ways of being, what is going to get us to raise up our level of being. Now, the next thing that we are going to do is that we are going to merge these levels of being into levels of consciousness. The levels of being are going to allow us to change our lives, and the level of consciousness are what will bring us closer to our own inner being, to our own inner God. And those levels of consciousness are seen in our spine. And to scale those levels of consciousness, we are going to do it by practicing the suprasexuality. In this practice, in which we are going to make those sparks of consciousness that we have liberated from the ego, we are going to make them ascend through our spine. And we saw that practice, for example, in lecture number 10, when we were talking about the seven bodies. So you can go and check that lecture if you don't know yet the suprasexual practice. And the psychological death is going to be like the basis, and this spiritual birth is going to give us like the height for the ascent in our levels of consciousness. And if we practice the third factor, which is the sacrifice for humanity, by teaching others how to change their lives, then that love that we are going to be developing within ourselves will like serve as an impulse, as the impetus to make this ascent faster. So you can see here how in our spine can be shown our different levels of consciousness. When we get to regenerate our physical body, when we get to regenerate our vital body, when we get to, by practicing the spiritual birth, we get to create a astral body, a mental body, a causal body, a bodic and an atmic body. When doing that process, and that process is done by practicing the psychological death, liberating all the essence that is trapped in the ego, by practicing the spiritual birth, that is going to make us ascend by making a wise use of our sexual energy to ascend all this essence that is liberated and merge them in our spine. Then we are going to be raising our levels of consciousness. There we are going to be merging our levels of being into levels of consciousness. And to end up with this explanation, let me talk a little about the psychological rebellion. This is important because it is like the most important thing I can say. Because in the most difficult moments of life, it becomes like hard for people to remember themselves, to make the effort to self-observe and to transcend the different situations. And for example, if we become unemployed, or if a loved one died, or if our relationship has ended, or if our company went to bankrupt, etc. In those moments, it is difficult not to like identify ourselves with what is coming. And in those moments is when we must learn to be warriors, when we need to appeal to the psychological rebellion and make the maximum efforts for not to identify ourselves with the situations. Because if we learn to see it, it is on the most difficult situations where more wisdom, where more understanding can be rescued. And only through psychological rebellion we can get out of those circumstances faster. And how can we practice psychological rebellion? Well, by making the effort to not identify ourselves with the situations of life, by understanding that everything in life passes, that we have experienced very difficult situations before, and yet they have already passed. And there you can see that everything is like that. Everything is temporary. Everything passes. And we must, at those situations, instead of letting us be carried by the sadness or by the hatred or by the fear, what we must do is to enter into reflective meditation and make a logical confrontation, that allow us to understand that all the situation is going to pass, and that if we work and we solve the situation within ourselves, eliminating the psychological defects that are manifested in that circumstance, then the circumstance will more quickly be transformed outside. In this way, we will be transforming our mechanical reactions. So, if before we only knew how to react with sadness, with anger, with hatred, with revenge, in the face, of a negative situation, now we will be able to psychological reveal, and we will act in a conscious way. And actually, I find this lecture particularly important because it allows us to see that happiness appears when we understand that the circumstances of life are just a reflection of what we are internally. And if we want to transform our lives, we can do it from the present moment if we learn to raise our levels of being. And this has been today's lecture. Thank you very much for watching this video. I want to invite you for next Sunday, where we are going to have where we are having another interesting lecture. Next Sunday we are going to be talking about exotericism, pseudo exotericism. Sorry, it's a name that is hard for me. And esoterism. Okay, it is a hard name for me, but it is a very interesting lecture. Don't miss it. And see you next Sunday. If you have any question about this topic, you can leave that in the chat, and I will be solving the questions there in the chat. Thank you very much, and have a great day.